Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about I Lost My Body. The best way to describe I Lost My Body is an animated movie that is about a severed hand that is trying to find the body that it is attached to. At the same time, it is cutting between the kind of sense memories that this hand has of being a part of this body and being a part of this person, their childhood, how they grew up, and mostly about the body and person and how he is falling in love with this girl and how his life is kind of changing based on kind of meeting her and how his life has started to change through her, but mostly how he's falling in love. While at the same time we cut to this hand trying to find its way home after waking up in a hospital refrigerator and like crawling its way through subways and garbage cans and fighting a pigeon and fighting rats and all these things just to hopefully get back to its body, or if its body is still there. When I first saw a trailer for this and heard about the concept of this movie, I thought it sounded really interesting. The whole idea of kind of sense memory and like how what your hands would remember about your life rather than what you, maybe your full body, I guess, if that's who's watching this, I don't know. You get things like him touching sand. You get a lot of shots of hands touching various things, which makes me nervous because anytime there's anything, you're like, oh my god, how's he gonna lose his hand? Like this, this is freaking me out because that's like one of those top fears, I guess, for me. You get a whole different sort of perspective because although the kind of love story and the backstory of this character is interesting, it's almost more interesting the idea of both the hand finding its way back to him and the hand remembering what it was like being a part of it. And that is really interesting because first they have to get this hand who can't speak or make facial expressions or have a voice or anything like that, emote and things like that, which it does actually really well. I didn't even think about it really quickly how smart a lot of what they were doing was, and just simple like kind of like hand gesture-y kind of body language, I guess, sort of things, and I found that to be incredibly interesting. And the animation goes from being this kind of like more fantastical, like the hand has to come up with this way to solve this problem kind of thing, to being much more natural with the other plot line. And they kind of play off of one another because one is obviously a severed hand walking all over the place and that's totally weird, and then this young boy who you see his life, you see how he grew up, you see how he became the man or boy. I don't know how old he's supposed to be. I never really understood that part of it, but they're not really 100% clear, but it is a French movie. I watched it in French because I'm 100% that bitch who would watch the movie in its natural language. I like the juxtaposition between the two because it kind of makes it seem more mythical but also makes it seem more normal in an interesting way, and it gives you kind of a break between one plot line than the other. And I never really got sick of either. In fact, I was really in this movie. I was very compelled by it, which is interesting because I didn't see this in theaters. I watched this on Netflix, actually, like on a laptop with my headphones, which is like probably the only movie of this whole year I've reviewed that way, and I was much more sucked into this, which is interesting because I was very compelled by it. And I think in a lot of ways this is a very kind of slice of life, kind of sketchier, kind of stream of consciousness-y kind of a movie that you kind of can assume is leading you down a path that all this makes sense, that there's a severed hand and everybody's going to be back together and all this nonsense. I don't think that's this movie, and I'm kind of fine with that. I will agree this isn't story-wise. It has some loose ends. None of these are puns, but even saying hand-drawn animation in this case is a pun. So I don't think it is like a totally tight movie, but I sort of like it in its own kind of weird expression of both who this person is and where he is in his life, which is kind of like a very lost period that's just sort of about to be found. And that's really fascinating in a lot of ways. I think there's a certain part when you're young and you're just out of college, which I'm assuming this person is, I have no clue, but let's just go with it. And you sort of, get a job and get a stable apartment and maybe have a girlfriend, and you sort of assembling adulthood like slowly. it like starts to come together and you're starting to figure out how to get through life. And I kind of feel like this was what that is. And I don't know if the hand is really supposed to represent anything about that, but I think the life that he is getting into is. I do understand if people don't 100% love this movie. I know there seems to be, everyone's very passionate about this one. Once a famous award at Cannes, the Nespresso Grand Prize, which is the Nespresso, like the company, it won the Nespresso Grand Prize, which is the first animated film to do so. I sort of like when films about young people aren't so tied up in a bow, because I think that's particularly a period that can go off on tangents naturally, like in life, and should be captured that way. And I feel like I Lost My Body does that actually really well. But it also kind of gives you an interesting perspective because of the hands, and I've never appreciated my hands more. If you ever feel like you take your hands for granted, watch this movie, because there's so many times I was like, oh my god, you gotta appreciate your hands. It's so wonderful to touch stuff, and just the thought of losing that, oh my god, that was like, it was like a horror movie in a lot of ways. Just the idea of getting a hand severed or something seems very horrific. I find this interesting because animation often doesn't get to be this loose and this kind of foreign in a lot of ways. This feels like a foreign live action film, and I guess you could say, why is this animated? For at least the plot line is just, you know, this kid's life and falling in love and stuff. But personally, I think the animation is really pretty to look at. It's traditionally animated or hand-drawn, but I thought it worked really well. You know, it is kind of this idea of kind of the fantastic and the kind of more subdued slice of life thing kind of going at each other. But I think it's ultimately about the slice of life, because as maybe the fantastical side has to come to terms with the real side, and that's maybe a sense of growing up. But in a lot of ways, I think that fantastical side maybe shows the possibilities of life that he needs to open up towards, which he's been closed off from for most of his life. So maybe actually that's it, now that I'm just saying that just now. I Lost My Body is a really fantastic film. For me, I think it's more of a cult, weirder, loose end film, and I guess like I can tell you, yeah, that didn't maybe work or something, but I just found it really a fantastic piece of animation art in a lot of ways. And I know like maybe Klaus is the tighter, more interesting spellbinding film, but I found that we can still make interesting cult animated films like this. I think is a really great thing for the medium, and something we probably should be talking more about, that the medium has opened up to these different kind of possibilities. And I know the director of this film, Jeremy Clapham, tried to make this film for about 7 years, and it does feel like a certain like very much labored over kind of cult film, which are always kind of the cooler ones. This is a weird, strange movie. Definitely the can walking around reminded me of the Pickle Rick episode, in terms of not necessarily the violence, but kind of him like trying to find his way through sewers and things like that. And that is obviously like him evading something. This, I don't 100%, maybe my theory, what I said earlier, is true, but I think for the most part that this film is really about him kind of coming to terms with growing up and being a full-fledged adult, and not anything more than that. But that's a huge step in life, and maybe we should be appreciating the kind of big moment that is for him as a person. Also, he just lost a hand, and that's gotta be fucking weird. So if you've seen I Lost My Body and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.